Hey everybody, just wanted to shoot a quick video about, as you know, I've been going through scripture, kind of cataloging different prophecies and that kind of thing. I just finished Isaiah and I've been in Jeremiah the past week or so. And a couple of verses really jumped out at me that I wanted to share. And I talk about these in a couple of my books. I highlight this verse in my first book about Israel being the super sign, the fact that Israel is a nation again is the super sign that means we're in the end times, because all of the end time prophecies have to have Israel in the land again, as a bona fide nation. And it blows my mind that some even Christians think that Israel becoming a nation again is just natural, like it has nothing to do with Bible prophecy. But then, and there's tons of verses that talk about it in Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah, all throughout the Old Testament. There's, I think, every Old Testament prophet except for Jonah mentions Israel becoming a nation again and the Jews returning to their homeland. But these two verses jumped out. I knew there was one of these, but I didn't realize that Jeremiah actually recorded this twice. So I'm going to read this verse for you, and it's pretty compelling. In Jeremiah 16:14 through 15, it reads, "However, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be said, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt, but it will be said, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites up out of the land of the north and out of all of the countries where he had banished them. For I will restore them to the land I gave their ancestors." So notice there's a dispersion. They're all over the world. And also notice the detail that it says they'll return from the land of the north. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So I knew that verse was there, but then as I was cataloging prophecies in Jeremiah, I got to chapter 23, and it says it again. And as you know, if God says something once, it's important. If He says it twice, that means He's really trying to get you to pay attention. So think about what that first verse said: that the parting of the Red Sea, the Israelites leaving Egypt, all the miracles, all the plagues, all the miraculous stuff that God did through Moses to get the Israelites out of Egypt. That's, as amazing as that was, the Jews coming into their land again as a nation is going to be a bigger miracle than that. And that's what Jeremiah said. And again, he reiterates it in chapter 23, verses 7 through 8. It says, "So then the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer say, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites up out of Egypt, but they will say, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the descendants of Israel up out of the land of the north and out of all of the countries where he had banished them. Then they will live in their own land." So again, almost identical, there's a couple different words there, but almost identical prophecy. And the reason I want to mention it, other than the fact that Israel is the super sign and them becoming a nation in our day in modern times is a bigger miracle than the Exodus from Egypt. But also, he keeps mentioning the land of the north. And then if you go to Ezekiel 38 and 39, actually, if you read Ezekiel 36 through 39, you see the chronology that Israel will come into the land again, from being dead and scattered all over, the dry bones, all that kind of stuff, coming to life again into their own land. Then after that, there's this war called the Battle of Gog and Magog. And I've talked about that a little bit before, but without going into too much detail, basically, that prophecy is a future prophecy that Israel will be attacked from her northern border, from Russia, Iran, Turkey, and then a few other nations that they're aligned with, Libya and Ethiopia. By the way, every single one of those alignments is in place right now. Syria is no longer really even a nation. Russia, Iran, and Turkey control it. And all three of them have military assets in Syria right now to the north of Israel's border, just like Ezekiel says. Now, the reason I mention all that, that's a whole nother thing, that prophecy could happen at any moment. I believe it happens after the rapture. But anyway, that's a different message for a different day. But I want to mention, many people don't realize the history of the Jewish people in Russia. In the 1800s, they had these things called pogroms, which were basically large-scale targeted riots where they just murdered and beat up Jews, blaming them for all kinds of stuff. And honestly, we're seeing some of that kind of revive, the groundwork for that to revive in different places around the world right now. And that's causing more and more people to make aliyah, which means to go up to Jerusalem, the Jewish people to head back to their homeland. So, but then fast forward, so that was in 1800s, but if you fast forward to 1980s, like before the 1980s, like Jewish people couldn't even leave Russia and they were mistreated and stuff like that. But in the 1990s, post-Soviet Aliyah began to happen. And so in the 80s with Mikhail Gorbachev, I grew up kind of in that era. I remember him and Reagan, and I didn't understand it at the time, but it was a big deal then. Basically, they opened up the border so that people could flow in and out. And let me see how many Jews. 1.6 million Soviet Jews left Russia at that time. That's the land of the North, and I'll explain that in a minute. But almost a million of those went to directly to Israel. Some came to the U.S. and some went to Germany and a couple other places. But since then, every year there's I forget exactly what the statistics are, but I think last year there was like 36,000 people made Aliyah or returned back home to Jewish people come back home to Israel. So this is all fulfilling prophecy. But the reason I wanted to mention the land of the north thing that's in the Jeremiah prophecies is because that lines up with the Ezekiel prophecy. And some people have debated, well, is the land of the north Turkey or is it Russia? But in Ezekiel, it says the uttermost parts of the north. I mean, and if you look on a map and you go straight north from Israel, it's Russia, and it's the uttermost parts. In other words, not just a little bit north of Israel, but really far north. So anyway, all those things just jumped out at me as key details that are mind-blowing when you study Bible prophecy. And the more you study it, the more you see how much the details align with everything that's happening in our day, everything that has happened since 1948 when Israel became a nation again. And I just want to bring that up because I want you to share this with other Christians that you know that maybe don't realize how key Israel is to Bible prophecy. It's not a theory, it's not a preference, it's not an obscure verse here or there taken out of context. It is all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Jesus talked about it, and we read about in Revelation how it's all going to be centered on Israel and Jerusalem with the Jews and their land. I mean, you can't get away from it if you study Scripture honestly and take it at face value. So anyway, I just wanted to share that while it was fresh on my brain. Sometimes something will hit me and I'll say, oh, I'm going to do that later. But I found that I need to, when the Lord hits me with something, I need to just quickly record a quick little video and share it because it's compelling and maybe somebody needed to hear it. So anyway, hope you shared that video. Hope you enjoyed it. Email me with questions. Like and share this video, please. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I'll have some really cool news coming up for my ministry and some co-ministry I'm continuing to do with Jeff Kinley and Harvest House and a couple other ministries. So super fun stuff coming up and some book releases. So stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll keep you up to date. Thanks a lot.